Centralia, Pennsylvania was settled in 1841 and incorporated in 1886. While it never grew to massive proportions, this was a coal mining town that was doing very well. In its peak, it had its own school district with elementary schools and a high school. It had 2 Catholic schools, 5 hotels, 7 churches, 27 saloons, and 2 theaters. In the early 60s, there was a controlled burn at a landfill very near this graveyard. The controlled burn was extinguished, and all was well. Except that it wasn't. Unbeknownst to anyone else, the fire had been set on top of an area of ground that had a coal seam that was very near the surface, and the fire ignited that coal seam. No one knew about it, but in the meantime, the fire was burning out of control underground, and it burned down into sections of abandoned coal mines under this area. The state of Pennsylvania started to monitor the fire, and they actually drilled boreholes to see what was happening. Those holes only added oxygen, and it made the fire burn hotter. They kept monitoring the fire, and they actually installed carbon monoxide detectors into each home and building to protect the residents. As the years went by, the underground fire only spread faster and farther. All attempts to stop this coal mine fire was unsuccessful. Finally, in the early 1980s, a young boy narrowly escaped certain death when a sinkhole into a burning mine opened up beneath him. This brought the attention of the world to this town's plight, and the state stepped in and started offering buyouts for residents who wished to leave. Many didn't want to take it. By 2013, the state actually declared eminent domain and they condemned all of the buildings. Residents that did want to stay, however, were allowed to remain until their death. So we had the chance to come to Centralia. It has been on my list of things to do and to look at for quite some time. I actually shelved it and went backwards and stopped looking at it because I saw that the graffiti highway had been closed down to people walking on it. But I had the chance this weekend to come up and look at it. So we have been walking around or driving around, and we're heading, just seeing what's here. Pretty much nothing. It's just a bunch of empty roads. There is one church, which is very pretty, but they have no trespassing signs all over it. And there's some graveyards that we're checking. Other than that, it is just roads, some remnants of some retaining walls, and some sidewalks. Slowly, the population has decreased. In the 2020 census, there were only 5 residents living in this town. We're on Paxton Street in Centralia, and we stopped because we could see some remnants of the old walkway. Crazy to think this was somebody's house. The other side, you can see there's a sidewalk there. I don't think we're going to see much up here because they pretty much leveled it all. Yep, it's all been leveled. So we just ran into a gentleman that was here at this graveyard, and he told us a story about how there was a lady that lived in a house behind where you guys are, that way, and it's gone now, but she was insisting that there wasn't anything burning under her house. There was no fire, and she wasn't going to move. And he told the story about how, it would be 3 feet of snow everywhere, and her house had no snow on the ground because there was a fire underneath it keeping it warm. He also talked about how she would turn on her water, her cold water, and hot water would come out because the fire was warming up her water. So that was kind of a neat little story. We ran into a gentleman at a graveyard, and he said that if we walked down this road about 100 yards, we'd see a bulkhead, be able to put our hands in, and we'd be able to feel the heat and smell the sulfur of the burn. We have not found that, but I can say that down here we see this puddle, and this one is frozen. But if we come back here, right around the corner up here is another puddle that is not frozen. So maybe 25 feet apart, frozen and not frozen. So you tell me, is it the Centralia fires? I don't know. Oh, and the puddle right there, that is most definitely still cold weather. We went down that away to look for a bulkhead where you can apparently feel the heat of the fire. It is not cold enough to see smoke yet, but you can apparently feel it. We ran into another guy who talked about how he is out here getting him stuff, nature, and cutting down trees, and how he has, in the last 2 weeks, come across a ghost. He is seeing a gentleman in a flannel shirt, and he goes to put something in his truck, turns around, and the guy is gone. And it has happened to him twice just recently. So that was kind of interesting. Jason and I are kind of like, wouldn't that be kind of cool to find a ghost? But I don't think that's going to happen today. Other than that, it is just empty roads up and down. But we're exploring. In 2002, the post office actually revoked the zip code for Centralia. And honestly, many of the current maps out there don't even show Centralia listed. They say there's enough coal to burn for another 250 years. But if they're lucky, the fire will burn itself out in about 100 years. No excuses.